God damn it, can't you commies do anything right? I was so fascinated by this, and you had to screw it up, you know? With so many ways this could have gone wrong, and you had to choose the most lame. You blew it, you limp-dick nutless fucks. This is Americanitis, episode 25 for June 20th, 2020. I'm your host, Daniel Sagner. This podcast contains harsh language and covers adult topics. You'll be challenged by views with which you do not agree. We may not be politically correct, but we are correct about politics. Okay, we have got a lot to cover and not a lot of time. This time, actually check out the show notes. Tons of links to original sources. Also, thanks to everyone who shared the cast last week. Let's keep that going. Almost at 100 subscribers on YouTube, and then I can set my sights on 200. On the actual podcast feed, I think it's closer to 3,000, but YouTube is where I'm at. Last week, I said I was fascinated by the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ for short. Well, that has changed somewhat, but I'm nothing if not a man of my word. I told you I would be coming back to this topic, and here we are, so let's see what we've learned. What is CHAZ, you ask? Well, if you aren't aware yet, here's a brief description right off the CHAZ wiki page. CHAZ, or CHOP. Yeah, they tried to change their name, but I like CHAZ better, and they literally cannot tell me what to call them since they have no governing body, so fuck them. Quote, is an occupation protest in self-declared autonomous zone in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle, Washington. The zone, originally covering 6 city blocks and a park, was established on June 8, 2020 by George Floyd protesters after the Seattle Police Department vacated its East Precinct building, unquote. Last week I reported on their demands and how they got their first warlord, but I didn't really dive too deep. Since then, I've been gathering information about the area, and I spent the last week gathering what audio I could. Hard to find anything of good quality, as most of what's coming from the area are just regular jamoufs with their cell phones. On the other hand, it's amazing that we can now have this technology that allows us these instant updates from inside the zone. Thanks, capitalism. On June 10th, there was a confrontation in the zone. This is when most people became aware of the man known as Raz Simone. Raz is a SoundCloud rapper and a 5-star Airbnb superhost. That last part is not a joke. His newest addition to his CV is that of a law enforcement officer. You see, he and his posse didn't like that somebody was painting graffiti on a particular wall and decided that he needed his face rearranged. Here's some audio from this encounter. I have included the best parts and the context, but don't ever take my word for it. Link in the show notes. The whole thing is 53 minutes.
You don't know the owner of this place? The owner that's actually being nice and letting us stay here?
Oh, God.
You forgot. We are the police of this community now. We are the leaders of this community now.
Here's your stuff. Get out. I didn't assault you. I could have. Trust me. I gave you a little love tap. Trust me. I could have assaulted you. Walk away. Walk away. You need to go. You need to go.
I'm trying to leave.
You need to go. Go.
Get
go.
the fuck off.
Go.
We're trying to leave. Stop.
Go.
We're trying to leave. Go. We're just fighting for days. Stop. What the fuck? Seriously, stop.
But just for now, to relieve the tension, have your group leave right now. Get your friends and just go. Just for your safety and for everybody else's. Just to relieve the tension, mentally and physically. You feel me?
Yeah, but
okay. It's just
motherfuckers just putting hands on people for no reason. You know what I mean?
It's because
like
it was
it's one thing to guide
disrespectful.
somebody.
Yeah.
It's one thing to guide somebody and give somebody love.
I understand.
But that motherfucker grabbed him by the shirt. You know what I'm saying?
There's certain points.
And this is brothers grabbing brothers. You know
That's
what I mean?
again,
This wasn't just
if
white
your
foods
friend
grabbing white
wasn't,
foods.
if your friend wasn't just disrespectful, there's certain times where verbal.
He just said, "Don't
there's
touch
certain
me." That's all he said.
He didn't say. He did say,
He
"Don't
did. He
touch
said,
me,"
"Don't
but before
touch
that,
me."
he was
Mhm.
being very disrespectful.
Yeah,
and in
I didn't
terms
hear
of that,
none of that.
I know you didn't hear that, but that's what
And I
most
was
of
right
everybody
next
that's
to him.
confronting him did hear, and that's when it comes to a certain point where verbally confronting you and telling you to stop when we're if like 20 people, 50 people telling you to stop doing that, it's disrespectful, and you keep saying like, no, we don't give a fuck what you're thinking. Hey, and we keep telling you that for about 10 minutes and you're still not listening, you might need a little love tap. just to wake up and say, hey,
Right, but
we don't need your energy here because you're fucking it up.
The point of the matter for us is that if we're gonna say fuck cops, that's how we say fuck cops.
Okay.
All of us have been arrested for
That's
that shit
beautiful.
mad times. I got
That's
7
beautiful.
felonies for the shit.
That's beautiful, but that
Right.
building, I'm sure the artist that painted that spent time on that. It was the safest thing is to go right now. I would love for y'all to stay, but the tension was unable to diffuse properly because we had to get to the point where physically addressing it was the best way to get a point across.
Yeah. Hey, what the fuck?
Hey.
What the fuck? Hey, what the fuck, bro?
Sit the fuck down.
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Have a conversation.
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Have a
Sit down.
conversation.
They'll give you your phone.
You will
Sit
get your
down.
phone back. Just have an open conversation with
down,
an open
have a
mind for us, real quick, okay?
You just broke my glasses. I'm blind.
You can buy another pair of glasses. You fine, okay?
No, I can't. You hit a girl.
And you was
No, I didn't. It's on film.
Sit down.
You just did.
Sweetheart,
Hold on.
Get the fuck off me.
I am not on
Bro,
it. If you were
get
threatened
the
by me,
fuck-
I'm
okay.
not.
If you don't,
Stole my
all right,
phone and broke my glasses.
we're giving you a lot of chances.
Where's my phone?
Bro,
We're gonna give
if
you
you don't
a
sit
my
down,
phone.
I'll make you sit down.
Dog, hey, dog.
I can't
Don't
talk to you
fucking
if you're
touch me,
yelling,
bro.
so calm
See, and
down.
that's the problem this guy has, dude.
Sit down.
Can you please stop?
Ass down.
What is this over?
I just want him to sit down so that we could actually have a fucking conversation. Which, no, he's completely avoiding. Bro, keep saying that shit and do something.
Stop it. What I want you to understand, I respect your spirit and I respect what you were trying to do. I respect your protest. Listen to me. I respect your protest of what you were doing on Better Lines.
I cannot.
I'm not. Wait. I need you to.
Stop fucking touching
I am not
me.
touching
Bro,
you.
You just
Calm down.
It's on film. You have been yelling at me for the past 20 minutes. Are you serious?
But I need you to talk to me.
You just broke my glasses.
and we could have broke your face. Your pants surrounded.
But can you talk to us, please?
15 minutes, what is that a threat? Why would I talk to you?
Because we can't have a conversation and come to an understanding if we
Yo, you
don't.
just said 15 minutes. 15 minutes, what? That's threat?
Okay?
Oh, you got someone coming in 15 minutes? I just said 15
So-
What the fuck you talking about 15 minutes, nigga? What the fuck you talking about? Don't be talking no threats around here, my nigga. Don't be saying no threats, nigga. I'll blow your brains out, nigga.
Those sound like nice folk who are ready to lead a peaceful protest in an area with no police. It is wonderful that on the second day of a protest against police brutality, some dingus declares himself the police and beats the shit out of someone. Great work, team. Maybe later we can all look out over our piss-poor garden filled with failing plants that would make a goat choke and think about how we would all starve left to our own devices. A few more incidents of note. Again, all linked in the show notes. CHAZ was handing out guns. Yeah, he's pulling them out of the back of the trunk of his Tesla and asks if anyone knows how to use a gun. One kid says he can, but he can't even hold it properly. He grabs the gun by the clip, and everybody in the video is all startled. It shows the same kid continuing to hold the rifle throughout, so it's not like anybody took it away from him. He's still there, supposedly holding that rifle. Gonna get himself killed. Another one, car tender. An arsonist tried to light a store on fire with hand sanitizer. The owner put out the fire, called 911, and detained the suspect to hand over to police. Let's see what happens then.
Go back. I'm sorry. You gotta go. You gotta go. I'm sorry. Just off his property. Just off his property. Just off his property.
Don't fucking do it! Hold it up, guys!
Get back. Please get back.
What you just heard was a mob breaking down the fence and starting to walk towards the man. the owner of the store. He was then forced to give up the suspect, who fled into the crowd, was then apprehended, and then got away again. And he is still not caught. And this was touted as a successful example of community policing. I would hate to see an unsuccessful example. That was piss poor. So I was perusing the CHAZ subreddit, as one does, and I did notice somebody offering sexual assault support groups for people in CHAZ. Now, it took me a moment because there haven't been any claims of sexual assaults happening inside the zone. But you got to think that a bunch of people walking around, no police, they're already all hyphy and hyped up. That's probably going to happen. And that's pretty sad. But, you know, there are no police around. So here are these just rando people on the internet offering these support groups. I just found that to be somewhat interesting. Also, there was a fire at the East Precinct. The local news is right next to the building, and they're performing an interview. The fire starts, and the news crew runs over to film it. The crowd puts out the fire, and then the crowd turns on the news crew, suggesting that they set the fire. Let's take a listen.
We're just here to support you guys. And
Hey, put it out, put it out, put it out, put it out. Hey, everybody, put it out. Yo, what the fuck, bro? Hey. Hold it. Get the shit out of the way, bro. Hey, what are you doing, bro? Yo, don't just throw shit. It'll spread. There you go. No. Don't use the tap. Get the building. Hey, move the gasoline. Water. Anybody too started it? Who did that?
get bodies up here now. We need bodies all around
Who the fuck did that? Who started it? They're trying to sabotage us. Watch everyone. Anybody trying to sabotage us? It's not us. Don't try to sabotage us. Bullshit. It's sabotage. And whose camera is that? Why is TBS? Hey, yeah. It's fuck TBS. This is where
Guys, we don't need to go after reporters.
fuck CBS. It started when they showed up.
We don't care. We have the eyes on us. We're just going to keep going. We don't give a shit.
We want them here. Freedom
Please
of the
interview
press.
me. And him. Because I want you to know, and I want you to show that this is.
It doesn't fit their narrative.
We are peaceful.
Here's the deal. Nothing happened. If they had a fucking camera set up to record the whole
But what are you going to say? That nothing happened? Or that we're like rioters?
It'll never show.
Can you please show that somebody tried to sabotage what we're doing?
Because I just did an interview.
You're not gonna show that.
Positivity, they cut half of that shit out. Like I didn't.
They're not going to show that we're being sabotaged. That's fine. We already know that.
You guys did a great job. You put it out. It happened.
I'm just like explaining why we're on it.
So that was your guys' plot? Someone's filming the movie. Say your name. What's your name?
That's a liable mission.
3 o'clock. Why is there a whole camera set up at 3 o'clock at night? And then we have
Pointing directly at where the fire just went in front of this precinct.
CCTV later showed an unidentified man setting the fire, and they still haven't found him. What this shows me is that people of all stripes have completely lost trust in our media. Phrases like, the media is lying, and so that was your guys' plot, and it doesn't fit the narrative, and you work for Donald Trump, and all the conspiratorial thinking or bromides that we hear from the right more frequently. It seems clear to these protesters that the media cannot be trusted. Well, that was the exciting news, and then it all seemed to turn around. A homeless guy took over one of the farms, so he made his own autonomous zone inside the autonomous zone. So, I mean, how far does this go? Is it just turtles all the way down? Eventually, the clergy sided with the cops. Let's take a listen.
Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best has been criticized for using tear gas on protesters and told her officers last week she was angry about the decision to abandon the East Precinct on Capitol Hill. But as KUOW's Amy Radel reports, leaders of black churches in Seattle came to her defense yesterday.
The pastors who took the podium at the Goodwill Baptist Church in Seattle's Central District made clear they are angry about the state of policing in the U.S.
Chokeholds have to go. Knees on our necks have to go. Shooting and killing unarmed black men and women, it has to go.
That's the church's pastor, Bishop Gary Tyson. But Tyson said the members of United Black Clergy want Chief Best to lead them through the process of change.
We are standing with our chief to bring unity in our city.
The pastors said Best faced an impossible situation with the protests. Victoria Beach chairs the Seattle Police Department's African American Community Advisory Council. She condemned the protest zone that has sprung up around the East Precinct.
The chaos, the circus up there in front of the precinct is a circus, and it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter or the murder of George Floyd.
I'm also including a link to an article where somebody was interviewed worried about the longevity of the protest and keeping its focus. Quote, "Black activists say there must be a follow-through to make sure their communities remain the priority in a majority white protest movement whose camp has taken on the feel of a neighborhood block party that's periodically interrupted by chants of Black Lives Matter," unquote. Yeah, I can see that happening. Seattle actually put in new barricades. The city installed new barricades in a reduced area, effectively decreasing the area known as CHAZ. The barricades even had plywood attached to all sides so that the protesters can paint them. I mean, come on. Does this not sound like when you were a little kid and you were allowed to use the couch cushions to make a fort and you got to use the big boy markers to draw pretty pictures? I mean, who made this decision for CHAZ? Well, they're all decentralized, so I guess no one? Some rando on the ground who said okay? Maybe the mayor just did it and no one objected. All I know is that this is when I lost interest. When the state starts helping with your anti-state coup, you may need to look in the mirror and ask what the hell you are doing. One of the barricades even has spray painted on it, "Do not cooperate with the state," which is just ironic, sad, blind. You look like a bunch of spoiled fucking brats with daddy's money, too much time on your hands, and more faux outrage than sense. You're not just bankrolled by your bougie folks, you're assisted by the very state you wish to rally against. You look foolish, impotent, and childish, and it would be funny if it weren't so fucking disappointing. What we have here is a hippie love-in. It's burning CHAZ. CHAZella.
Right now, we're proving we don't need corporations. We don't need money. This can become a commune where everyone just helps each other. Yeah, we'll have one guy who makes bread, and one guy who he looks out for other people's safety.
You mean like a baker and a cop?
No, can't you imagine a place where people live together and provide services for each other in exchange for their services?
Yeah, it's called a town.
You kids just haven't been to college yet. But just you wait. This thing is about to get huge.
So, yeah, I'm done with CHAZ. Unless something interesting happens, I'm out. This went from anarcho-socialist micronation experiment bound to implode to state-sanctioned block party real quick. Speaking of things I'm done with, do you remember the time we were all told to stay inside and our jobs were destroyed for fear of a virus? Have you noticed how the news is suddenly picking up COVID stories again? Cities have stopped literally burning for a hot minute and the media needs to keep your fear level up, so don't forget about the nasty bug going around. Woo! I submit for your inspection a clip of the Black Trans Lives Matter protest in Brooklyn. Links in the show notes. I know this isn't great over an audio medium, but suffice it to say, it's at least a couple thousand people. Great turnout. Now you may say, "Hey, Dan, weren't we just told that if we didn't hole up in our caves that we would be killing Grandma? Weren't we just called greedy and uncaring for wanting to go back to work?" Why, yes, Jimmy. Yes, we were. But these protests are just so fucking important, and they have to happen right fucking now, don't you understand? If anyone opposed gatherings of thousands during a pandemic, or if they question the wisdom of the lockdown orders, well, those people must be racists, Jimmy. Now run along, you little rascal, you. These protests have been going on for a while, so you might be looking to the data to see if the protests had any effect on the infection rate. Whoa. You can't do your own thinking, silly. The talking heads have got this one for you.
I think it's important, though, that we not just look to protest as a reason why we might be seeing spikes across the country. Because before these protests, we were seeing spikes. I think at least 14 states that reopened early, or that where we saw a lot of gatherings around Memorial Day are reporting spikes. So the reopening of America, in some cases early, has already generated increases in cases.
Good luck trying to convince Americans that Florida allowing people to exercise their freedoms is the problem when they can look out their window and see a zombie horde of protesters yelling and coughing all over each other. You're not fooling anyone. But this will be the narrative. The explanation that racism kills more people than COVID didn't work. So now they're covering their asses and trying to shift the blame onto people who are just trying to live their lives and be productive and happy. They'll try to wallpaper over it and hope no one will remember how wrong they were and how consistently, but we won't forget. Oh, and I almost didn't mention the case of Rayshard Brooks. But it does have an interesting component. To jog your memory, this is the case of the gentleman who was fatally shot by the police in a Wendy's parking lot. He was the one who grabbed the policeman's taser and fired it backwards at them. It's interesting because depending on your politics, you can see something completely different here. It's like a Rorschach test, you know, the one where the psychologist keeps holding up pictures of my parents fighting. If you believe that law and order are necessary to protect this republic, you see a police officer defending his life and the lives of those around him. If you believe that all police officers are brutal racists, then you see an armed white man shooting an unarmed black man. But I see a different connection between this incident and the George Floyd killing. In both cases, these men were killed for relatively minor infractions. George Floyd was killed while being apprehended for passing a counterfeit 20. Rayshard Brooks was killed during a confrontation that occurred because he was drunk behind the wheel. The integration between these two is to not pass a law if you are not willing for it to be enforced with the business end of a gun. Any law whatsoever, no matter how minor, has a gun at the end of it. Next up, I'm not so sure if you've heard this one, but they're redefining racism. You see this newly minted college graduate wrote into Merriam-Webster and whined about the definition of racism. Now, file this bit under O for Orwell. This has been in the works for a long while. Those university graduates who fixate on the farcity that is race and see everything through that lens have finally gotten the dictionary to bend to their will. You may think this is no big deal, but control the definitions, control the concepts, control the culture. This is newspeak, and it's double plus ungood wrongthink. The Merriam-Webster dictionary now contains the definition for racism that includes the power dynamic. You see, these brainlets have convinced themselves that racism is actually prejudice plus power. I talked about this in episode 3, check that one out, but I will repeat myself here. Under this definition, you can only be racist if you have the ability to make your racism felt in society at scale. Under this definition, a white man who will have nothing to do with Brazilians as he thinks they are lazy and is rightly labeled a racist. But a black man who thinks that all Jews are untrustworthy well poisoners is not racist. This is because the white man is seen to have power in society, and the black man is not. This theory does not take into account that we had a black president, national security advisor, and secretary of state in the same time period. This theory does also not take into account that many white people indeed have little to no power to have their ideas, racist or not, felt on any scale. These inconvenient facts do not matter. The very idea of considering the individual is a foreign idea entirely to this miasma of collectivistic garbage. This theory classifies people only in terms of race. You are white or black or Asian, that's it. That's all these people care about. And let's call them exactly what they are. Racists. They are so obsessed with race and little groups and who's more oppressed than whom. I heard one racist the other day suggest that people of color shouldn't be used anymore because it erases the unique experiences of black Americans. You know what? I couldn't agree more. Maybe we need to get more specific, though, because I'm sure that black people from California have a different experience than black people from Alabama. So maybe we should get more specific, maybe down to the neighborhoods, or even how black someone is. Did they have a white grandfather? Well, that makes them a little bit different. What if they're successful and run a few businesses? What if they had 2 parents in the household? What if they didn't? What if they were a same-sex couple? What if they're gay or bi? What if they got beaten up in high school? What if they didn't lose their virginity until they got married? What if they used drugs and got scared off of it and never used it again? What if they lost their sister to suicide and now work at a helpline? What if they like to paint their fingernails fun colors? What if they have a dog named Sparky? What if they broke their collarbone climbing a tree on a dare to impress Susan? Do you see what I'm getting at here? It turns out that this thing people call intersectionality can get extremely granular, to the point where you actually just get down to the individual. You layer enough groups and details on a person, eventually you're left with a living, breathing human. I say cut out the bullshit and putting people in little groups and races and cliques, and just treat everybody as an individual person with a story to tell and value to bring to the table. I thought this kind of backwards thinking would never survive the light when it emerged from the dank basements of our once great colleges. I thought any reasonable person would look and see its many internal inconsistencies and obvious clashes with reality. I thought this because I had too high an estimation of the average man. I like to assume the best in people, you see. But the general populace find themselves without intellectual paladins. There are not enough mental warriors to go around. We are spread too thin, and yes, I mean us. The new intellectuals, those who advocate for freedom and reason, for you cannot have one without the other. Who will protect us against the onslaught of regressive ideologues? The clashing waves of university-fed minds that vie for the destruction of America, which they see as the evil of all evils. The conservatives? They agree on almost everything. They are both malignant growths off the same tree. Altruist collectivism. It is right to sacrifice, and people are primarily their group membership. That's it, in a nutshell. The only quarrels are about how much to sacrifice and to whom. The conservatives sacrifice the young to the old with Medicare and Social Security, the living to the unborn with abortion laws, and soldiers to foreign countries with diplomatic aid. The liberals wish to sacrifice the white to the black with reparations, the rich to the poor with eat-the-rich programs like the wealth tax, and the bright to the dull with affirmative action. They both demand blood for the blood god. They need you to sacrifice yourself. They need you to want it. They need you to throw yourself willingly onto the pyre and destroy the best in yourself for the worst in others. I am the man who says no. Got a topic or feedback? The podcast is at Americanitis Tech. You can also follow me at Dan Sagner. My last name is spelled Sierra Alpha Golf November Echo Romeo. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts if podcasts are your thing. I'm also on YouTube, so remember to annihilate that subscribe button. Patronize us at patreon.com/techside. Show notes are at techside.net/Americanitis. Theme music by Eddie. I thank you all for listening. Later days.